I think it's extraordinary. Again, we've talked about these royal women really pushing the envelope, and here we have the Princess of Wales doing exactly that. And just looking at the footage of the visit to the Royal Marsden, she's one of them. You know, she is so relatable because she's been through what they've gone through, and talking about the plug where she's had chemotherapy, and it just makes her incredibly relatable.
I want to go back actually to Vanity Fair because we know how quick they are to dismiss things. They haven't put out anything.
It's an interesting one. As a PR expert, Ailsa, do you think this is the safest way to play it?
I do. I think if you start, adding fuel to the fire, then you're just elongating a story. So I think there are times to stand up and be counted, and there are times to say nothing. And I think actually they're right.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Right Royal podcast with me, Andrea.
And me, Emily.
There's never a dull moment on the Royal Beat. It's only our second episode of 2025 and already so much has happened.
Yes, we've had an incredibly poignant outing for the Princess of Wales, who's announced that she's in remission. Prince William has been getting the drinks in, and the Princess Royal is in South Africa on the first royal overseas visit of the year.
We will be welcoming our guest, former Communications Secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Ailsa Anderson, to talk about the Duchess of Edinburgh as she turned 60, and taking a closer look at a week of extraordinary highs and lows for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
Yes, a fortnight on from our last episode, there is still a lot going on for Harry and Meghan. Shall we get started?
Let's go. Where do we even start, Emily? I mean, we finished off the last episode being excited about a new Netflix show featuring Meghan, which got postponed a day or so later.
So it's our magic touch, I think, Andrea.
I know. And then, obviously, we had the wonderful surprise on the eve of what was supposed to be the launch. The Princess of Wales stepping out, revealing where she had had her cancer treatment, which was top secret up until then. What an incredible outing for Kate that was.
It was. And can I tell you, when we found out that this was going to happen, it was just really exciting.
Yeah.
Nobody knew until shortly before the engagement began where it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then it all made sense very quickly. The Royal Marsden is the leading cancer centre in the UK, one of the top in the world. And for her to go back publicly through the front doors for the first time, it's something she even commented on, that it was a novelty for her, was a really big deal. This was about her saying thank you to the staff who'd care for her, putting on the map the brilliant work that they're doing, but also, as she said she was going to last year, staying hand in hand with the people still on the journey.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful to see that. And I have to say, I have some people very close to me in my life who have experienced cancer recently, and a few people have said to me that the difficulty is not all in the journey itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the aftermath.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's knowing how to go back to your life as it once was no longer exists. Everything has changed for you.
Yeah.
And there were some people on social media last week saying, oh, why has it taken her 6 months to go and do this? Which I think is pretty uncharitable, to be honest. I think everything is a journey of recovery for her at the moment, as it is for so many others going through this. And can you imagine as well, if you've finished chemotherapy, you've finished your treatment, your instinct would be, I don't ever want to go there again. I don't want any more to do with it. You want to put that behind you.
Yeah.
And we saw even in the way she was interacting with patients, sort of slightly jumping when she heard the machines beeping.
Yeah.
This is still so fresh for her.
Yeah.
So I think it was it showed remarkable resilience. I wrote that last week in the newsletter for Royal Club. I think the fact that she, again, was opening up so much about her experience, about the shock of her diagnosis, about how difficult it is to get your head around all the new details, and needing support for loved ones as well, who are having just as difficult a time in many ways.
Yeah.
Talking about her chemotherapy port, saying that she'd grown really attached to it and felt strange when they asked her if she wanted to remove it. We're learning things about her that we might never have imagined her telling us.
Well, no, none of the royals. We would have never, ever had this. I mean, ever.
No.
And it's never happened before.
No. And what she's doing to raise awareness, but also to show people this happened to me too. And I know and I understand, as our good friend Arthur Edwards said last week, she's showing not just sympathy, but empathy.
Yeah.
And I think that it's been hard won for her.
Yeah.
But what power she can bring now in this role as the new royal patron alongside William.
I mean, that was incredible news. I can't imagine that day would have been easy. And you would never tell from the photos. She was back to what she does best. She was smiling, talking. And I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. And towards the end, some very moving scenes, you know, her hugging patients and I believe a mother.
That's
whose
right.
daughter was receiving treatment.
That's right. It was, and that must be really hard. And as Kate said, you know, I wish there was more I could do. It must feel like a monumental task really to go and be there and support people who are still going through this and facing, in many cases, much tougher outcomes than she has had. And, you know, her words to the mother of this 19-year-old daughter, I believe, who is in ICU, were, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And how comforting must that be?
Yeah. She also spoke about wanting vitamin D, you know, sunlight. Did she say something about water as well? Or?
Yeah, I think she was almost joking that she's like a plant.
A plant, yeah.
And that she needed that. And I mean, you know, it's January in London. I wholeheartedly concur.
Yeah. Now, this was not the first time she actually visited the hospital, because we've since learned that she actually went around Christmas time with some festive treats for those, I imagine, involved in her care.
Yeah, that's right. She did make a private visit. So this wasn't her first time going back. But obviously it was her first time sharing that moment and revisiting with the public. But it really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the way she sees this going forward. She's obviously so grateful to the people who cared for her, and now is going to really do whatever she can to bring more support in. And we know the Kate effect. We know the effect she has on causes, on, you know, let's not forget Heads Up, the mental health campaign, the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood, the impact she has on fashion. What can she bring here? This is going to be incredibly powerful, I think.
Yeah. Now, we have to just briefly mention that also we've learnt in the last week that she did take a nice family break after Christmas with her family and her sibling, James, and his wife. So they went to the Alps skiing. It shows, you know, she's getting there. It's probably maybe her first holiday of the whole year, you know, after undergoing treatment. So it's kind of nice.
I think it's great news that if she has been able to go away and spend some family time in another place.
And celebrate that she's in remission, because she would have hopefully known that.
We haven't even got to her personal message yet. Exactly. So, yeah, I think so. And the fact that, as she's been saying throughout, the doctors have told her to focus on what brings her joy, because that's so important. She said at the hospital last week, I've been told all along I have to try and stay positive. And she needs to do whatever she needs to do. And if that's spending time with her children, with her siblings, wherever they are.
Making memories.
I think that's incredibly important. But going back to her personal message, as if the visit itself wasn't enough.
Yes.
She then posted later in the day on social media her own message of thanks to staff and the announcement that she's now in remission. And again, this is something a lot of people were asking questions about last week, but I thought you said you'd finished treatment. And it's important to remember that, yes, she finished treatment at the end of the summer. We're 6 months on from there. That's probably about the amount of time that she's needed to have more scans, to have more checks,
to see how the treatment,
to see what the impact of that treatment has been. And so this is where we are now, and it's fantastic news.
It's fantastic news. Well, it's an exciting way of starting 2025 compared to how we started in 2024, for sure.
As I said this week in the magazine, this is an absolute full circle moment for her. You know, this happened 2 days, I think, before the first anniversary of her operation. So what a turnaround. In 12 months, she's gone from being the patient, the vulnerable patient facing so much uncertainty, to being the patient's champion, you know, going back there as their patron.
Now, for King Charles, that looks a bit different. We haven't had that sort of news, but he is still undergoing treatment.
Yes.
We're assuming. He is still incredibly busy, and he actually has a very important trip coming up.
Yeah, he sure does. He is going to represent the UK to Auschwitz, which is the former Nazi concentration camp in Poland, which on Monday will host world leaders to mark 80 years since its liberation. Now, this is such a symbolic moment for the world. It's especially given various things that are going on around the world as we speak. And I think that it's something that he wouldn't have missed.
Yeah.
And however his treatment is going at the moment, this is clearly a really big priority for him. It's his first time going there. Queen Camilla went for the 75th anniversary. We know, obviously, other heads of state, other prime ministers from this country have been in the past. But this is going to be a really key moment. And it's going to be something that the wider royal family will be taking part in. There's an engagement for the Queen this week relating to Holocaust Memorial Day. Prince William will be attending the official commemorations in London at the same time that his father's in Poland. And I think this is a really special moment in the whole series of commemorations we've had. You know, it's going to be the 80th anniversary of VE Day this year. This is one of those occasions where we're likely to see some of the survivors for the last time at such a big event.
There are just for our listeners and all viewers, so many royals attending. We've got, Princess Mary and Prince Frederick of Denmark, King William Alexander, Queen Maxima. We have Queen Letizia, King Felipe, Crown Princess Victoria of Sweden. Are we expecting maybe also Donald Trump, who has just been made president? Will he be meeting King Charles?
I wouldn't like to second guess anything that President Trump does.
After his meeting with Prince William, I need to see how it goes with King Charles. It's just come up to my head. I wonder.
It's a big question. Watch this space, I guess.
Oh wow!
But we do know that certainly, people within the Foreign Commonwealth Office, I think, are looking to plan some visits potentially to the US in 2026. That's going to be a big year of anniversaries over there. So there is scope for a lot of this. And we know that the King's hoping to make some more trips this year. So,
oh, wow. Honestly, one to look out for on Monday. That is going to be a very big day for us.
It is going to be a big moment.
Now, let's talk a bit about Camilla, because she has been out this week. She went to visit the hospital where she gave birth to her daughter, Laura.
That's right. The Great Western Hospital in Swindon. It's an NHS hospital. And it was interesting because she still hears quite a lot about what goes on there from her grandchildren. She joked about the fact that she'd been sent various photographs for them, with fingers pointing in the wrong direction after accidents and various things. So I think she's kept quite abreast of what's been going on there. And of course, it is quite near to her home, Raymill, out in Wiltshire. So a nice local one for her. And, she met a therapy dog. They're all the rage. Princess of Wales met one at the Royal Marsden. And we've also had the Duchess of Edinburgh.
Yes, with a little puppy. Those pictures
were gorgeous. A lot of royal dog love this week.
Dogs are very photogenic. They make a picture. I'm telling you, they make a picture.
You're trying to replace me?
No, I couldn't. Never. Now, I wonder if we could talk a bit about Princess Anne, because, we are going to talk about Princess Anne very briefly, with our next guest. But she's in South Africa.
She is, off on the first official overseas royal visit of the year. She's carrying out a stack of engagements, which won't surprise you. She's doing something with Riding for the Disabled in South Africa. She's also unveiling a monument to South Africans who were part of the labour force that helped contribute to success in World War I. And that's a very significant moment. It's something that's been organised by the Commonwealth Graves Commission, which her husband is very closely involved in. He can't be there, unfortunately. He's got a torn ligament. But what is interesting for me, I think, this year is that she's going to turn 75 this year. It's a big moment.
It's a big moment.
We know that Princess Anne is not going to want to make this a big moment by any stretch.
But we will. We will.
We're going to. We are going to. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say, if anything, on that, because it's really quite remarkable. The amount, she was still the hardest working member of the royal family last year.
Yeah.
She's not showing any sign.
She hates attention, though.
She hates attention. She likes the attention to be on the work, on the people she's highlighting.
And we're going to dedicate an episode to you because that's how much you love us. I know it.
She's not going to be listening to this.
We'll send it to her anyway. Shall we continue talking about her, though, with our next guest?
I think we should. It's the wonderful Ailsa Anderson, former Communication Secretary to Queen Elizabeth II. And I think we can say she's a Right Royal podcast regular these days.
Yes, love her. Let's welcome her.
Ailsa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you back.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Well, we wouldn't have missed this for the world, because you are very knowledgeable about somebody who's enjoying a big birthday this week, and that is the Duchess of Edinburgh. But before we get into that, I also wanted to ask you about the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, who is starting, as she means to go on, in her 75th birthday year with a trip to South Africa. I think about 8 engagements in 2 days. Tell me what your impressions are of her, having worked closely with her.
I was her press secretary for almost 13 years, and she's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, who can believe that she's 75 and yet still one of the most hardest working members of the royal family, both internationally and domestically. I remember when she was 60 and we were trying to think about how to sort of, mark this wonderful occasion. Of course, she doesn't like any fuss or any bother. So the only sort of way we could go down a particular route was to do a documentary about her sporting achievements. So we got the BBC Sports Department to do the documentary, and that was sort of the insight. But she just didn't want, it's never about her. It's always about everyone else and the institution and how she can shine a light on her patronage and her charities. She just doesn't want the fuss.
Yeah.
Was the late Queen big into celebrating her kid's birthday?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Obviously, I joined the royal household in 2001, so all her children were all sort of grown up and with children of their own. So I don't know. Really good question. I suspect she would have been.
Well, she used to host sort of for milestone birthdays. There would be special events, wouldn't there, at Windsor and things like that. But I do wonder when the big day comes around for Princess Anne later this year, what, if anything, we'll see maybe a trip to a lighthoous.
Yes.
Does enjoy a lighthouse.
Do you know, Emily, that's such a funny thing. I remember it was late on a Friday night in Buckingham Palace. There was hardly anyone there. And I went to the back door, and the Princess Royal had just come back from visiting a lighthouse. And we stood chatting probably for about 25 minutes about lighthouses. I got a masterclass in them. And I thought, wow, she's not playing lip service to this organisation. She really genuinely, passionately believes in it. And it's quite extraordinary.
We need to send her a gift.
I'm wishing her a year full of lighthouses ahead. But, again, we saw this obviously from the late Queen, from the Duke of Edinburgh as well. No sign of slowing down.
No.
Do you envisage a day where she'll retire?
I don't. She likes to get on and do things. I can't see her retiring at all. I mean, how old was Prince Philip when he retired? Well into his 90s.
Yeah.
And the late Queen was still looking at red boxes, still seeing prime ministers until almost her death.
Yeah.
So, extraordinary work ethic.
I think Anne said herself once in an interview that she didn't have very good role models for taking things
slowing
easy.
Down.
Yeah.
Let's not forget she's there on her own. Her husband was supposed to join her,
yes,
but he had to pull out last minute.
He has a torn ligament, I believe, which sounds very painful.
Very.
But you'd like to think that won't sort of faze her in any way anyway. She can do it all with her eyes closed.
But it's always nice to have that support of a spouse. I mean, we all know in any walk of life, it's always nice to have your partner by your side, especially when you're fulfilling a public role. So I'm sure she will miss him, and he's a great sounding board for her. But she has an amazing private secretary, and she'll go on and smash it.
Wonderful. So we have seen, of course, someone else you know very well, and that is the Duchess of Edinburgh, celebrating her 60th birthday.
She doesn't look 60, does she?
No.
Incredible.
She looks amazing.
I think we all need to know her secret.
Her skincare. I've seen her up and close. Her skin is...
She's radiant.
Yeah.
She's absolutely radiant. Clean living.
Yeah.
What did you make of her portraits?
Beautiful. And I thought it demonstrated exactly who she is. Sort of fun-loving, a bit mischievous, yet relaxed, sitting by that window. I think it was at Bagshot Park, laughing. And really, she's got such an open, lovely face. And I just think it displayed everything of who she is.
Now, we talked last week for a feature that I was writing in the magazine about her this week, and you told me some really lovely things about what it was like working with her or working alongside her. I mean, tell us a little bit about her character. What makes her stand out?
I think with the Duchess, it's never about her. It's always about the organisations that she represents. She is warm and lovely and generous and kind in and out. It's not just a show. It is exactly who she is. She's incredibly family orientated. And she's also incredibly kind to the people who work for her and serve her. I remember when, in fact, for both of my children, when I gave birth to them, she sent flowers to the hospital. I got a gift when I got home for the kids. And, she didn't have to do that.
No.
And I just thought that's such a level of kindness. And again, incredibly warm. And I haven't heard a bad word ever said about her. And incredibly supportive. As I said, she's not seeking the limelight. But I think, as King Charles' reign continues, I think the limelight is possibly seeking her.
Yes. Well, they're depleted in numbers now. The royal family slimmed down, whether by design or not. Do you think she should be brought more to the fore by the palace? If you were still there, would you be looking to...
I think she's doing more and more anyway. And what I absolutely love about her, she's not afraid to push the envelope. And you think of all the work that she's done with, sexual violence against women. She was the first member of the British royal family to go to Ukraine. She's gone to some pretty scary places to shine a light on what's going on there and the organisations working hard in there. So she's talked about the menopause, all the things that traditionally members of the royal family won't talk about. So she really is a trailblazer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think she would still be doing this type of thing if the late Queen was still here? Because I feel like she's become more out there since the late Queen passed. Obviously, I don't think it's because the late Queen passed, but her new role.
No, I think she would have done if the late Queen had still been alive. I mean, clearly they were incredibly close.
Yeah.
And I know the media often said she was the closest daughter-in-law, very, very close. Both geographically and emotionally. And so I think if the late Queen was still alive, yes, the Duchess would be doing all of this. She started doing this many years ago. I just think people are actually sitting up and noticing now.
Did you see that bond? Because you obviously worked with Sophie. Did you see the bond that she had with the Queen up close?
Yes, absolutely. A very, very warm, genuine relationship, loving relationship, may I say. But that is the sort of person the Duchess is. She is very, she's got a lot of emotional intelligence.
We've also seen Lady Louise this week.
Yes.
Oh, really?
In military fatigues. And that is fascinating. She's taking part in officer training corps, I think, at university, really following in her grandmother's footsteps, not just the rest of the royal family. But, I mean, what do you make of that? Is that a given that younger royals will inevitably go into the armed forces?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. Clearly, 3 out of the late Queen's children all served in the military. Princess Anne is head of the Women's Royal Navy Service, as was. The late Queen was the daughter of a naval officer, the wife of a naval officer, and head of the armed forces. So they're always, I think, the royal family have always had a huge connection to all branches of the military. But I don't necessarily think that the children or grandchildren need to join unless they want to.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think we're living in different times now as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could go back to Sophie's birthday photos, because I want to talk a bit about the photographer. Now, she kind of broke a bit with royal tradition, what we like to say, breaking royal tradition.
Oh, you love to say that.
We love to say that
Winds me
online.
up.
Can you tell us a bit about her choice of photographer?
Yes, this was a young up-and-coming female photographer called Christina Ebenezer, I think of Nigerian heritage. She's doing a lot of fashion and portraiture, but this was a choice made deliberately by the Duchess, we're told, because she wanted to show her support for a young female photographer. And it is interesting because there are some fantastic royal portrait photographers out there who've been around the block a fair bit, some of them, who've taken countless images of members of the royal family over the years. So it's really refreshing, actually, to see her go for someone completely different.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the point about her, pushing the envelope. not being afraid to actually do something a bit different. And as I said earlier, I thought those photographs was stunning. She looked absolutely glorious.
And it really speaks to her passion for supporting other women, and women's equality. We're told that's something she's going to be, she's feeling very excited about doing more of in the coming years. And she does seem to have really carved out this niche for herself, doesn't she? Really since in 2019, I think, when she took on her work with the UN and Preventing Sexual Violence Initiative in the UK. And like you say, she's tackling some pretty gritty topics that other members of the family, might like to get involved in perhaps, but she perhaps has that position where she doesn't have quite as much responsibility as others, and she's able to really commit to these things.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hugely appreciated by the organisations that she's representing.
Yeah. We've also read recently, I believe it was in the Sunday Times, reports that William sees her, as the rest of the family do, as an incredible asset, but going forward that he would like to make more use of her. You have to ask, don't you? Do you have to suddenly get a bigger workload at 60? I'm hoping that's not coming my way.
I think he has. I mean, Sophie must have been such great help for them this past year.
Well, we know they get on well.
Yeah, and we know that Sophie and Catherine get on really well. I mean, we saw it at Remembrance and that hand.
Yeah.
That meant a lot. That picture was the picture of the day, wasn't it?
It really was, yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised that, William wants someone like Sophie. Well, and obviously Edward.
Well, she is a huge asset, absolutely.
I wonder whether, he sees some of his wife in the Duchess. They're both from similar backgrounds, sort of middle-class girls made good. Yeah. I wonder whether that's... Sophie reminds him of Catherine.
And both put their children before anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we definitely saw that, didn't we, with Kate over the last year with her illness. The Duchess herself had some tough times, didn't she? Certainly giving birth to Lady Louise. Do you think that's stood her in good stead overall, helping her, bringing more empathy, taking on particular charities, certainly the site things she's been involved in?
I joined her household before she had children, and she was very empathetic then. I think it's something she was born with. She's got a really amazing sort of common touch with people. People really relate to her. When you see her talk to either elderly people or children, she's bending down, she's engaging. And that's not for the cameras, that's because that's how she operates.
Yeah.
So I think she's always been that kind of person.
Now, obviously, Sophie's birthday, her pictures came over the weekend, but just before those pictures, I want to start talking about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, because last Friday there was quite the article from Vanity Fair that came out, 8,000 words, and wow to every single one of them.
It was quite an extraordinary piece of journalism, and really painting quite a picture of a challenging situation for Harry and Meghan in America, in terms of some of their commercial projects, in terms of some of their employees, questioning the way that they treat staff, Meghan in particular. And you can only imagine what a blow this was, coming off the back of her show being postponed. So since we last spoke, we discussed at great length the fact that her show was about to come out. The LA fires obviously have, put a hiatus on that for now, which is absolutely the right decision. But it feels like they can't catch a break at the moment until today.
Yes.
And now we must talk about Harry's court case against NGN. Were you expecting this, Ailsa?
Absolutely not. So obviously there was a lot of speculation that Prince Harry would actually attend the court hearing. He wasn't there. And then there was the delay and the delay and the delay, and then speculation about why the delay was happening. And then this morning, every news channel, every website talking about it. A deal has been struck. I mean, how extraordinary is that?
I know. So to give listeners and viewers some context, this was a 5 years long legal battle between the Duke of Sussex and News Group newspapers, publishers of The Sun and formerly News of the World. And he was alleging unlawful journalistic activity, intrusion into his privacy. And rather than accepting a settlement, as many others have done, he was saying throughout that this was about accountability. But I think most people were surprised yesterday, and I was listening in to the trial. The opening arguments should have happened yesterday morning, and there were 2 adjournments, and then lawyers on both sides asked for a 3rd adjournment, and then it became very clear that there was going to be some kind of an agreement. Now, I was finding this quite surprising, given that he had said throughout, that this wasn't about the money, this was about finding the truth, this was about establishing who was responsible for, the things that he had suffered as a result of certain reports over the years. It was the last thing any of us were expecting. And yet today we've heard this agreement, we've heard the apology that has been given by Newsgroup newspapers, and we've had a statement on behalf of Harry. And really, I think it's answered a lot of his questions. He will have walked away from that feeling pretty pleased with himself.
What do you think made him settle? The fact that what the apology said, or the money?
I think it's the apology.
The apology.
I think that the money will have been a partial, gratefully received, and I'd be interested to see what he does with it. Whether it will just go towards paying off his legal fees, whether it will perhaps in part be donated to charity. Who knows? But this for Harry is very personal, as we know. This was about him holding people accountable. He was never going to just walk away from this case. And it really was, an 11th hour intervention that stopped it all coming out in court. But he was not just alleging, unlawful activity by journalists. And it's important to say that Newsgroup newspapers is not admitting that journalists carried out this, but they are accepting that private investigators did target him. He said all along that it wasn't about the money. The money will have been gratefully received. Let's wait and see what he does with that. It may all have to go towards his legal fees. We've heard that the legal fees for all 3 parties, including Lord Watson, who is the other claimant in this case, could amount to around £10 million. We're hearing reports that he secured an 8-figure sum in compensation, what the court described as a substantial amount of compensation. But aside from this, what mattered to him was that someone took responsibility, not only for what happened to him, but almost more importantly for him, for what he says happened to his mother. And I think that was the thing that took most people aback this morning when we heard that, they're making that apology, not just to him, not just to Lord Watson, but also to Diana, Princess of Wales. And that is something that he's carried with him, and they acknowledge in the apology, since he was a young child. And so you have to hope that this will allow him to have some kind of closure in something that has given him so much trouble over the years.
Yeah, and he's vindicated.
He feels vindicated. He doesn't have to be cross-examined in court.
Which must be a relief to the rest of the royal family as well.
A huge relief. I think everyone is happy, everyone, barring perhaps the court clerk who had mapped out 10 weeks.
And the judge.
Of admin, exactly. Well, maybe he gets to go and have a holiday or something now, I don't know. But it's quite an extraordinary turn of events. And, Mr. Justice Fancourt was saying in court, I find it hard to believe that this agreement couldn't have been reached a bit sooner.
Yeah.
But it's taken until now. And
it's also a good day for his ex-girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, because in his book, he mentions this time when they were together and things were leaking and they were going mad. So surely it's a good day.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is that the Sun has always denied, and still denies, we should say, any voicemail interception. That's the phone hacking. But they have said in their apology, Newsgroup newspapers, they have apologised for what News of the World did in terms of phone hacking anyway. And that's interesting because it wasn't part of this case. So they are kind of giving a blanket response to all his claims. And I think he will be pleased with that because, as he said all along, it wasn't just for him, it was for the people close to him and the intrusion into their lives as well as his. And it's hard to see, as the judge said, anyone else having taken it quite as far as this. So a big gamble on his part, but one that's paid off in spades.
Is this the only trial that we were expecting for 2025?
Oh,
because
no.
He's got a few more pending.
Oh, no. Yes, the next we understand is in April. That's against Ravek. You might know what the acronym stands for, Ailsa, I can't remember. But these are the people who decide on security arrangements for VIPs in the UK. And this is his appeal against a decision to cut back his security provision when he's in the UK. And we know that means a lot to him. So that's next. He also has an outstanding case against Associated Newspapers, which I believe is due to start early next year. But having settled this case,
I wonder whether he will. Yeah,
that may well also go the same way. So look, busy. 1 out of 3 for this year so far, and interesting. And you have to think, well, something's gone in his favour this week because, as you say, with Vanity Fair and with Meghan's projects being pushed back, it's not what they were planning.
I want to go back actually to Vanity Fair because we know how quick they are to dismiss things. We saw this happen when the same kind of behaviour was reported in the UK, but they haven't really, other than some people close to the couple saying that they were very distressed by the article, they haven't put out anything.
It's an interesting one. As a PR expert, Ailsa, do you think this is the safest way to play it?
Actually, I do. I think if you start, adding fuel to the fire, then you're just elongating a story. So I think there are times to stand up and be counted, and there are times to say nothing. And I think actually they're right. Just let it go, and move forward. Otherwise, they'll be creating a further story of their own making.
Last time this happened, though, following a couple of weeks later, we had a lovely cover story in an American magazine where people that actually worked for them said how lovely Meghan actually was. It was kind of like coming back, and
there was a response.
It was a response.
It was a response. We may yet see that.
Will we get a response again, or will it just die down, not respond at all? It's best to just stay quiet.
I think they'll monitor it. That's what I would do. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction to something.
Yeah.
Monitor the situation and then make a rational decision.
What were your most... there was a lot in that 8,000 word story. What were you most shocked to read about?
I guess, what was interesting about it is that some of these things have been sort of rumoured or reported, but we were hearing from people closely involved, certainly, for example, in the podcast or in the Netflix deal, about a bit more about what had been going on behind the scenes. So I found it quite balanced overall because there were voices in there saying that they were great. There were voices in there saying, yes, they did have good ideas, but they just weren't right for this. It's not like they were sitting there and not coming up with anything. And then I also felt a bit sad for them. You have someone saying that Harry hadn't particularly made lots of friends at that point. We don't know when that conversation was had. It does feel like they're under so much scrutiny. And certainly if you look at what happened with the LA fires, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the programme. If the Netflix programme went ahead as scheduled, she would have been absolutely slammed for that.
Yeah.
So I think absolutely right decision to postpone while the fires are still raging and people are losing their homes and their livelihoods and their lives.
Yeah. And we spoke about this with our guest a couple of weeks ago. They do seem to be just very unlucky with things beyond their control, which is why I'm sure Harry is going to be pretty pleased about the outcome today. And it will be very interesting to see what happens next. It's been a long time. I can't remember the last time any other royal was this combative in the court.
Me neither.
No, it doesn't happen, does it? Does not happen. How do you think the rest of the royal family are feeling about it?
I would say relieved. Nobody, whether you're a prince or a pauper, you don't want your sort of personal life aired in such a public platform. So I would have thought relief. And actually, an apology goes a long way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think certainly, and we were discussing this earlier, it's not just Harry who has been impacted. And it's important to say by media across the board. I don't think we should particularly single out some more than others, even though some have been brought to the fore in court cases. William and the King aren't in a position to go out there and say what Harry is saying. Do you think they would if they could?
I think it's a fine line to tread, isn't it?
It really is.
And I think it depends on how much they do want to talk about things in public. But as you rightly said, they can't do that.
No. Although what struck me as very interesting as well is that Harry has obviously made the case for his mum through this court hearing. William did the same through his statement about the Panorama interview and Bashir, and that was incredibly strong from him, and something that we're not used to having come from the heir to the throne, certainly as he is now. So that's clearly something that is always going to be triggering for them.
You two, as journalists, do you think it makes people sit up, the media sit up, and then reevaluate what they're going to do going forward when they see strong statements like that, because they are so rare, or do you think they just plough on?
There's a really interesting question, Ailsa. I think the difficult one in this case is that it is rather historic, and the media has changed beyond all recognition since the days where this thing, apparently, according to their own admission, took place. I think a lot of people are far more concerned now about social media and the people managing those outlets than what went on a long time ago. But for the people involved, of course, it's still important for them to receive some kind of recognition or acknowledgement that what they feared happened did happen.
I want to ask a really tricky question, because obviously you worked for the royals for many, many years. What was the most...
How can you say that when I'm only 21?
I know,
really?
I know. You were
Clearly.
You were young and you were so good. What was the most challenging time or the most challenging kind of weeks in your role? I'm just trying to see how dramatic it was back then compared to all the drama that we get these days.
Do you know, I don't know whether I'd use the word challenging, because it was such an incredible honour and privilege. And you know, I would say that, wouldn't I? But it was. So I don't think I would use the word challenging, because, how lucky was I, how fortunate was I to serve the most amazing monarch and the royal family and an incredible institution. So I don't think I'd use the word challenging.
No, not challenging. Oh, I don't know how to put it.
I would say as well that you actually were there at a very a fairly buoyant time for the royal family.
Yeah.
You had royal weddings and royal babies. You had a lot of the lovely happy.
You had
the happy period.
It's all down to me, Emily. Obviously,
Maybe you should get back.
You need to get back. You need to
get yourself over to Montecito, Ailsa. What's going on?
I think the most challenging aspects, as you will know as a mother, is when you spend your day in Buckingham Palace and you have someone making you a cup of tea and looking after you, and it's all wonderful. And then you go home and your children say, "What's for supper, Mum?" And they don't really care where you were or who you've spoken to.
I'm
it's
back
just
here.
Absolutely crack on, mother.
If you were advising them now, what would you suggest should be their next steps?
I think focusing on what your interests, whether it be charitable, whatever, that really makes you passionate about, and get your head down and carry on doing those. And clearly, I've said before, I think Prince Harry's work with the Invictus Games is extraordinary. I've only heard good things about that, and the feedback from injured military personnel has just been extraordinary. And I don't think that would have happened without him. So look at the big wins there.
Absolutely.
That's coming up, isn't it? Vancouver.
That is coming up imminently. So that's a nice positive way to move things on, I would say. Just going back to PR approaches as well, and I have to ask you this, and we discussed it earlier in the show. The Princess of Wales, her personal statement telling the world she's in remission. What do you make of the way she's sort of taking ownership of her own story at the moment?
I think it's extraordinary. Again, we've talked about these royal women really pushing the envelope, and here we have the Princess of Wales doing exactly that. And just looking at the footage of the visit to the Royal Marsden and seeing her interact with patients and people in recovery, and she's one of them. You know, she is so relatable because she's been through what they've gone through. And talking about the plug where she's had chemotherapy. I mean, I've never heard any member of the royal family talk about something like that before, and it just makes her incredibly relatable. She really is here for the modern world, isn't she?
Ailsa, please come back soon. We love having you on the show.
I love speaking to you both.
Regular.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Thank
for joining
you.
us.
Thank you, ladies.
We'll see you soon.
And that's everything from us today. Thank you so much to Ailsa, Emily, and to you two for joining us.
In the meantime, get more from Hello with our entertainment podcast, The Daily Lowdown, available on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Bye.